What's going on, YouTube? This is Newo, and I'm a techno artist from Los Angeles. Today's video will be part 3 of an ongoing series about beating writer's block and staying creative within electronic music. Now, in the previous video, I discussed collaboration with friends, DJing with friends, and in the one before that, I discussed sampling and different ways to break outside of a creative block. So today, I just want to expand upon what I've already talked about and give you a couple more ideas of how you can continue to stay inspired, push your creativity, and really just gain perspective, right? Because perspective is all we can have in life, really. I mean, everything comes back to perspective, whether you're socializing or listening to music, even just like walking down the street and trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes is always powerful. And I think oftentimes it's easy to forget that we are all just people. Even your favorite artist, the person who you might think is so famous and on another level of existence, right? They're still just a person. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that we're not that different at the end of the day. The first point I want to make today about ways that you can beat writer's block and really just continue to stay inspired is redecorating your space or reorganizing your things in your living environment to encourage creativity. If you have a lot of stuff cluttered around and it's kind of like a messy space and whatnot, I would encourage you to just organize things. It's always good to know like where you're going to put your music equipment, where you're going to DJ in your space, if that's possible, if you have that equipment. I just moved to downtown Los Angeles and I'm in the process of unpacking and moving. It's really exciting because it's an opportunity to redesign my creative space. And luckily the place I'm in has a lot of natural light coming through the window. That's another thing too, is like try and get by a window. I mean, we thrive with the energy from the sun, or even if you're able to, even work outside. I mean, there's a lot of benefits of even just like taking your laptop to a park and being on a bench with your laptop and your headphones and getting that inspiration from the outside world. I know it sounds pretty general, but there's a lot of power in recalculating how you're gonna set up your creative space. Even if you have an artist that you really like, maybe get a poster of them and put that on the wall, or maybe get a piece of art or something visual that can trigger inspiration for you. My second point actually piggybacks off of what I was just talking about, and that would be really just get outside. Being outside, exploring wherever you live, that's a great way to gain perspective and gain inspiration. I mean, for example, here in downtown Los Angeles, now every time I walk outside my door, I'm surrounded by all kinds of inspiration, whether it's the people walking around, the graffiti on the walls, the different cars driving by in the streets. I mean, really take time to appreciate where you're at, because the more you appreciate where you're at, the more you will be able to absorb those, I guess, like frequencies that other things and other people emanate. You can also, if you're able to, if you have a place nearby that you can go on a hike, if there's a lake nearby where you live, or even just like a little pond with ducks or something, I think there's a lot of power in getting into nature. Obviously, if you're able to go to a national park or go to the beach, reconnecting yourself and grounding yourself with the outside world and with the natural world, because a lot of inspiration for like visual artists, that does come from nature, and a lot of designs that we use day to day copy from nature, down to the wings of birds with airplanes, structural designs, or even artistic designs like geometric designs. A lot of that really just comes from nature. So that's one thing that you really want to keep in mind, is how powerful the outside world can be. I know as producers, it's somewhat of a stereotype that we like to lock in and, be in this dark bunker working on music, and it's like really hardcore and we're not going outside. We're like vampires at 3 a.m. But I think even if you don't wake up early, like honestly, I'm not going to cap, I don't really wake up early in the morning. If it's like a nice afternoon or something, and I know we're going into spring and going into summer, this is a perfect opportunity to just get outside of your current space and explore new spaces. Now, My next point today is find melodies in things that don't really have a melody. Let's say you have a little percussion sample and it has somewhat of a pitch to it or somewhat of a tone to it. And then you can find another percussion sample or even a vocal sample, like a little, 1 second chop or something that also has a little bit of a melody. And you can start to stitch those elements together to create something that sounds melodic, but is not necessarily an instrument. It's not necessarily playing specific notes, but there's different timbres in the sounds. One example of that is what you're seeing right here is another collaboration with 92 Jaylani. I'm really excited for everyone to hear all these, but you'll see it says the Navi, hey, listen. So anyone who's familiar with The Legend of Zelda knows that there's a fairy in that video game, which makes these crazy sounds, especially in the Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask versions of those games. I mean, I didn't really play the later versions of the games too much. I played like Wind Waker and whatnot, but also that's a good point. Comment down below or hit me up what your favorite Zelda game is. I'm very curious. But the fairy in that game, it creates these weird little, like, I don't know how to describe it, these little sounds. And so what I did is I chopped them up and I placed a filter gate on it and some different automation to create just exactly that, a melody out of something that isn't necessarily melodic. And one way you can do that too is like for techno, you want to get those super hypnotic rhythmic grooves. So try playing a sound over and over and over and over at maybe dotted quarter note intervals or eighth note intervals or 16th note intervals, and just experiment. And what you could do too is make one version of it, right? And then make a new track with that same sample playing at either a different time frame or playing maybe at a different pitch or alternating from, an octave below to an octave above. Just experiment with like how you can slightly tweak those initial samples to start to essentially talk to you. So my next point today, to continue your inspiration, is to just build something. I mean, personally, when I was a kid, I was really into like radio controlled cars and airplanes, and I would build those. And I realized that's where I got a lot of my, I guess, like design creativity from. And really with working with sound, you're kind of you see all these blocks here, you're kind of working with Legos in a sense, like you're building little blocks together to create a larger picture. Right now in my new apartment, I'm building with my cousin and with my uncle a new bed frame. And that's been really fun. It's really been a thought experiment in creativity, because you have to think like, how can we fit it into this space? How can we make it structurally sound? How can we bolt it down so that it's secure? So whether you're into building small things, building big things, or even building digital things. I mean, I don't know how many of you are into like graphic design or video game development or anything like that, but even just building digitally is a great way to challenge your creativity. Essentially what I'm getting at is creating things that aren't music, right? And stepping outside of your creative comfort zone, because when you do that, you can apply some of those concepts, if not all of those concepts, towards music. And sometimes the best way to get creative is to have like a problem that you need to solve, right? I mean, what's that phrase? It's like necessity is the mother of all invention, right? So if you have a need for something and you can figure out how to fill that need, that right there is creativity. And going back to redecorating your space, maybe you can build something to fit in your space. Like maybe you can install a shelf or figure out how a shelf could work, or integrate a new lamp into your space, or even, it doesn't have to be big things. It could just be like building something to allow yourself to be more creative. I mean, for example, here, I'm going to be installing a shelf that I can put like my speakers on and my synthesizer on. And that's a process I'm trying to figure out of like, well, am I going to cut a custom piece of wood and then sand it and stain it and all that? Or I've been going to IKEA to try and see things that might work, but supply chain, they're out of most things. Yeah, I mean, and even like on your car, I mean, if you're into cars, maybe if there's a project you can do on your car regarding custom, maybe try putting new speakers in your car or something. I mean, whatever your budget allows, whatever your time allows, I just think that getting creative, especially with your hands, is a great way to start to unlock new pathways towards neural connections. My next point today about staying creative in electronic music, and really in any style of music, is talk to your family members, right? Talk to your family members about their musical experiences. And even if you're like me and you don't come from a family that's very musical, there's going to be someone in your family who loves music. I mean, that's just like a human trait, right? So whether it's your parents, your sister, your brother, your uncle, your cousin, anyone in your family, maybe ask them, like, what was the coolest concert you ever went to? Or what's your favorite record? Or what's your favorite artist? And kind of piggybacking on that conversation I was having about talking to people at events and asking them their experiences. I mean, what better way to connect both with your family and find musical inspiration by just talking to family members and seeing, maybe you have a lot of common ground that you might not have realized. I mean, maybe you have a family member who's really into electronic music and you just never knew because maybe it was like back in the 90s and it was a different style, and they might be a little out of touch now and think that electronic music is not as hot these days or something. I mean, for myself, like, I talk a lot with my uncle. He just saw Bjork twice this past week, and he was telling me, like, the visuals were insane, the music was great, and it doesn't even have to be the same genre. I mean, even if you have a family member who's like into classical music, a lot of that is applicable in terms of, like, I mean, classical music, it's very structured, right? The arrangement is very important, and those are both similar in electronic music as well as, I mean, there are some styles of electronic music that are very improvisation heavy, such as the stuff, I mean, Jaylani does. That guy is like freestyling a lot of these synthesizer jams and stuff. But for stuff we're making on the computer, it's more planned out. It's a little less of a freestyle. And DJing is in some ways a form of improvisation. I mean, some DJs plan out their sets or even just have a loose idea of what they're going to play. But some DJs, I know, like DVS1, for example, just goes off the dome every time and just finds records that fit the exact moment he's in. So another thing too is, like, if you have family members that play instruments, maybe just ask him if you can hear them play. I have a cousin who makes these really weird custom guitars, and I've asked him to play for me, and it's so cool because he's like so into it, and that passion is basically what I'm trying to get you to connect on. Is the passion is what unites all of us, because it's such a raw emotion. It's such a raw feeling that you want to tap into. My last point today, I would say be creative with cooking. And if you're not much of a chef, you don't have to be. Maybe you have a favorite dish at a restaurant that you want to recreate, or maybe you've always wanted to cook and you haven't been doing it. If you think about it, you're kind of like DJing with food, right? It's just so rewarding to make yourself meals, but it's also like a good way to start thinking outside the box, because kind of how I was saying earlier, like, necessity is the mother of invention. Maybe just see ingredients you have laying around and see what you can come up with. Almost like, giving yourself a set of samples or instruments that you have to work with, like I was mentioning in my previous video, and seeing what you can do. Those rules that you give yourself actually can unlock creativity. Another thing too is, like, even just try new types of food. Maybe you don't really eat a lot of Indian food and you've been, hesitant to try it. Just dive into it. Or maybe you don't really eat a lot of sushi. I mean, try that. Like, just push yourself to step outside of your comfort zone, because there's a lot of power in that. And that's kind of like the main point I'm trying to make with all of this is creativity can come from places that you'll least expect it, and inspiration can come from places that you'll least expect. I know today's video is both late and a little bit short, but I'm just in the process of moving and got a lot going on. But I really appreciate everyone checking out my content. Please follow me on Twitter, smash the like on this video, the subscription button, hit me up on Instagram. And thank you. Have a great rest of your day.